Today's main goal, right? I want to help you all leave today fully understanding what Copilot is. A lot of you may already know, right, how to go in, interact with it. Some of the first-party agents, because I find it's very important to understand what those are capable of doing before you go and build an agent, right? There's a lot of power just right out of the box with Copilot. And then we'll go into that Copilot Lite scenario, and I'll walk through live demo, what that looks like, how to go through it. After the session, if you go to that portal, we will have a link out to the instructions that I provide that I'm going through today. Again, so we want to provide you with resources to go and build these types of things in your environment. Before we jump in, just wanted to take a quick poll and understand, where are you in your AI journey today, right? And so Sarah will pop this up. And if you've got, again, we would love to hear and just kind of get a good understanding of our audience. So are you just starting, experimenting? Are you already really deploying agents across the organization, right? What does that look like for you? Great. So as we get into content, really the vision at Microsoft, how we look at generative AI in general, right, is Microsoft Copilot kind of being that doorway into working with AI, whether that is you're using our out-of-the-box capabilities with Copilot, or that is using agents that have specific tasks or complete significant tasks for you, right? So today we're going to be focusing on the retrieval aspect of this, right? So when an agent, you need to know some information, you ask an agent, it goes out and looks at targeted data sets to provide those responses to you. So that's really going to be our focus today. So as a user, right, I go into M365, I find the agent I want to ask questions of, I ask those questions. It's really important to understand that you can really ask anything within the Copilot boundaries, right, your work. We've built Copilot to sit on the foundations of Microsoft 365, right? So that means it inherits the policies that your organization determines, the security, make sure it's compliant across regions with certain regulations, right? And it's really just about trust. So the questions and prompts you put into Microsoft Copilot, they are secured. They are not shared or used to train models, right? Really important aspect to understand. Kind of frees open the capability for you to ask a wide array of questions to ensure that you're using your company data, you're getting the results you want, but we're not taking that data and helping it to train our models. So really important thing to understand. When it comes to Copilot, we recently had our Ignite conference a couple of weeks ago, and we made a new announcement around what we call Work IQ. So if you're on the call, you may have heard of us talk about the Microsoft Graph in the past. That is still a part of our solution, right? The graph is something that knows your emails, your meetings, your chats, who you're working with, the files that you're creating and working on. So it has this intelligence already about you. So that is one component. That is our data component of Work IQ. Another aspect of this is what we call memory, right? So Copilot's starting to understand your interactions, your style. How do you like responses? What are the relationships you have across your data and people within the organization, right? So that is where we start looking at memory, as Copilot will just continually improve as you work with it over time. And then the third part of this pillar is inferencing, right? So having some more of that contextual information about what you're looking for, what you want to accomplish, to give you some insights, help you a little more predictive. And it's looking at this again across your data and your memory. And if your organization does so, they can implement skills, right? So we can also inference what skills you have or what skills you're learning to also help provide the right level of information to you. Work IQ is all about improving accuracy in the responses that Copilot provides as you ask it questions. We look at Copilot really for every single user, right? This is from our knowledge workers to our frontline employees. And I specifically work in the manufacturing or with manufacturing organizations. And that means even, a person on the frontline floor, they need to figure out how to fix a piece of equipment that is down, right? A machine that's creating some product for them. How do they effectively do it, right? And using AI to do that can help speed up that process. But for knowledge workers, right, across sales and marketing, doing competitive analysis, research and design, developing new products with the help of AI, customer support, increasing the amount of time, the speed and accuracy with which we can respond to customer issues, finance, streamlining the workflows that you have on a daily basis, operations, right? Improving data quality and data validation. Data and IT, digging in to get more deeper levels of insights to help make decisions. And HR, improving all up employee experiences and really understanding what is the core of the environment we're trying to provide back. So again, lots of different use cases right there that we can look for, whether that's using M365 Copilot to provide some of this right out of the box, or we're building agents around these specific purposes. Now, you may have heard there's kind of two different flavors of Copilot, right? There's what we call Copilot Chat, and then that is where we're doing basically web-grounded information, right? Organizations can use this. It still use data protection. We don't train our models even with Copilot Chat. And it enables you to use basically GPT-5 on the back end to ask these questions, create new content, reason over the files that you have. Specific to today's session, right, we're going to build an agent that is only using web data. So if it's something you wanted to deploy across your entire organization, you could, because it wouldn't incur any additional cost, right? Because again, we're only grounded and looking at web data. So really important thing to understand. Now, if you want to pull work data into this agent that we're going to build today, right, then that's where a Copilot license or what we call pay-as-you-go would be required to do so. And so going from chat, the experience that every Microsoft 365 user has access to the licensed version of Copilot, right? That's where we get enhanced capabilities when we're working with files. We're looking across everything with that whole work IQ capability, right? And we get what's called priority access, which means researcher will run without running into any hiccups. I can create multitudes of images, right? Whereas if I'm using standard, I may be able to create 2 or 3 a day, right? But then I get stopped. So priority access is an important aspect of Copilot license. We won't get into it today because we're focused on Copilot Studio Lite, but when you have the full license of Copilot, you can also build agents inside of Copilot Studio, right? So the full version of Copilot Studio gives you a lot more flexibility on the types of controls you can do. You'll see that in a follow-up session. So again, just some basic laying the groundwork here of the agent we'll build today can be used in both. If you want to enhance that agent and pull in work data, where you're querying a SharePoint site or something like that, then that's where you'll need to think a little bit more about your architecture. All right, so quick foundations there. The next thing really is just around prompting, something a lot of you may be doing today already as you're working with any generative AI tool, is just kind of thinking about how do I get the right types of responses, the responses that I'm looking for. So I always like to point this out with folks in just understanding how do I prompt AI. So think of it from 4 key elements, right? One is the goal. What kind of response do you want from Copilot, right? And this is the same when we're writing instructions for an agent, right? What is the objective? What is the outcome that we're looking for? The context. Why do I need this particularly? Are there any people involved that I need to be responding to, right? Do I need to look at certain persona that maybe I'm interacting with? What's the source, right? Where is this information coming from? Today, we're focusing on publicly accessible websites, but that could be my email, that could be a meeting, that could be, a file that I was working on. And then the expectations. How should Copilot respond, right? Should it be something that is, business focused, a formal response? Should it be in bullets? Should it be a table? What does that output need to be? So think about that when you're prompting AI, or even as you're building the instructions for your AI agents. And this is just a quick example, right? A goal, generate 3 to 5 bullet points, the context to help me prepare for a meeting with a client to discuss their brand campaign, the source, pull out from my emails and team chats across a certain time frame, and then the expectations. Use simple language, but provide sufficient detail in each bullet, right? So again, just think about that as we're going through prompting. Next up, we look at the Copilot app. So I'm going to jump over into a quick demo here in a moment. But while I'm doing this transition, we have another poll for you. Really, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to Copilots or agents today, right? So you'll have a couple of options here again to choose from. You should see that pop up in a minute here from Sarah. I will pull up my screen. All right. All right, so coming into the M365 Copilot app, This is going through the web browser right now, but you may also see it on your taskbar if you're on a Windows device. You'll see a little icon, a Copilot icon, which you can see right here, with a little black bar going across it at the bottom if you're looking at your taskbar. It's very important to note to make sure you are in your enterprise, logged in with your enterprise ID. When you are doing so, you will see this little green shield in the top right. That means it has that enterprise data protection enabled. And that is where you know your data, your prompts, everything is secured to your organization's policies. Again, just always look for that whenever you're interacting with Copilot, just to double check and reassure yourself you're in the right spot. Now, you'll also see when you are a fully licensed user, you will have a work and web tab in the center, right? Work means I'm looking at my work data, but it could also be pulling from the web in the response. You can turn that off. Today, you would do that by going to the settings and unselecting web search when you're on the work tab. Or alternatively, if you don't want to pull in any work data and you just want to query the web, you would click on the web tab, right? So again, those are two things to be aware of as you are inside of the M365 application. Now, in here, right, we also have search. Think about this as your enterprise search capability, you know, what you're typically using. Maybe you use a one-word search or something like that. I'll just say proposal real quick. That's going to pull back some results. I can quickly filter to a type. And then what we've enhanced with Copilot here is the ability for me to click on an overview to kind of get a summary of what that document's about, instead of me having to go in and open every document and read through it. So quick snap of search. Library is if you create new content or files or pages within Copilot, you will see them show there. Create is the ability to create new images, create videos. We actually are adding Sora 2 to create videos from OpenAI, right? So you'll get some really cool kind of enhanced videos here. So again, these are some typical things I like to point out just because these might be the places where you start before you go and say, I need an agent to do the task at hand, okay? Now, part of the other aspects here is we see agents below, right? And so agents, one of the ones we ship with a Copilot license, researcher, analyst. We're going to talk about these in a little bit more detail here shortly. But again, super powerful tools that can provide really detailed reporting, insights, something that, again, I've seen many customers say, hey, we were thinking about an agent for XYZ. And then they see these and they're like, I don't need an agent now, right? I can just use these tools. So again, really super important. Notebooks, these are an area where, hey, I want to consolidate information and I want this notebook to reason over this information that I provided, right? So think about it as a subset of data. Maybe you're in procurement, right? And you've got a bunch of RFP responses coming in and you want to analyze those. You might pull all of those into a notebook and have that notebook be the place you're storing it, you're sharing it, you're working to understand more about, hey, what's the best path we should take? What questions should I ask of these vendors? So think about categorizing that information kind of into a notebook. And you can also access those notebooks, fun enough, through OneNote. And then towards the bottom here, we have chat. So all your history, right? So when you are working with Copilot, whether you're using an agent to do it, whether you're just doing one-off with the out-of-the-box chat, always start a new chat when you're changing topics. Because what happens is in a session, it uses all your previous responses and questions to help build on top of that data, right? So when you are changing topics, make sure to come in and click this little new button at the top to start a new chat. Really, again, really important aspect to understand. Inside of our chat experience, there are a couple of things I want to note. One is you can always just start typing right away, right? Obviously, that's something you can do. You'll start to see this voice conversation where you can have two-way dialogue back and forth with Copilot, right? Versus typing and then having to read. You can have that two-way dialogue back and forth. You can dictate your content as well. To look for specific content, if you want to explicitly call out a meeting or a file or anything of that nature, right? You can come in and do a slash and do that. Or, really important in what we're doing today, if you want to call an agent, you can use the @ symbol. Right? And that will pull in the ability for you to access an agent right directly from this chat experience. So again, just want to kind of give you kind of an oversight into how to work with Copilot here, especially as we're going to get into building the agents. I see the question in the chat from the attendee. Instead of starting a new chat, can we tell the prompt to ignore the previous or used portion? I would recommend against doing that. I can't say if if there's any particular accuracy on that, but what's important here is when you start a new chat, it starts a new tab over here on the side, right? So if I want to go back to a previous chat and ask a follow-up question on that topic, well, now I might have interrupted that, right, by saying just ignore everything that was used previously. So definitely recommend you start with a brand new chat every time. You can choose to go in and delete chat history if you want at a later point, right? So you can do some cleaning there if you need to, but I would still recommend clicking that to start a new chat. All right. So again, high level view, quickly jumping into a lot of these. The last piece I want to mention is you'll always see kind of these little prompt suggestions below. And as we expand on that, right, we see some additional options. Then we also have something called a prompt gallery. So you can click into that and kind of get a jump start on certain things as well, right? So if I want to create new content, well, I can select that. Maybe I'm in marketing. I select that. Maybe there's a particular agent I want to use, so I can do that as well. You can share your prompts with your team. You can look at the prompts that maybe you have saved, so you can access those and use those as well. So again, you get some good flexibility there. I'll come back and talk a little bit more about the history and things as we start getting into some of the agent aspects. And with that, I'm going to flip back to my presentation. All right, so agents, right? That's really why we're here today, is to kind of start jumping into what is possible. There are a lot of ways that we can look at agents. So to start with, right, we have Microsoft agents, right? So we've built a number of them and we continue to build more agents. We're talking about researcher and analyst a little bit today. Those were two of the first agents that we developed at Microsoft to make publicly available. Again, super powerful agents that we can use, but we have a number of others that are being deployed out as well. A project manager agent. You may see the interpreter agent inside of Teams meetings, right? There's a Copilot inside of Teams meetings as well. A facilitator agent to help keep notes and track of tasks that are in your meeting, making sure you're staying on task with your agenda. We've got now SharePoint agents that you can build, or use our knowledge agent in SharePoint. Teams channels have an agent. We now have an app builder agent in a frontier mode. That's kind of our experimental mode, where it can help you build an application, right? Same thing kind of goes for creating workflows in your daily process. There's a new agent for that. So again, we just continue to build more agents and make them really focused on certain types of tasks. You can discover agents through our agent store. And so what's there? That could be third-party agents that maybe you have their tools in your organization. You can pull that third-party agent into 365 Copilot. You can also build your own through Copilot Studio Lite that we're doing. Your organization may build agents for you, right, and deploy those out for your use. So again, really a lot of flexibility there with going in and discovering where these agents are and what agents are available. And then the last, building your own custom. Today, we're focused on Copilot Studio Lite, which is kind of that personal productivity. Maybe my immediate team can benefit from the agent that I build. But when we want to build really robust enterprise applications that can act on our behalf, do some autonomous actions, that's where we'll go into those custom engine agents, where we'll use the full version of Copilot Studio to build. So I did mention some of our agents, right? Some of these already that I mentioned. I talked about a couple of other ones as well. We're also building agent or application-specific agents, like one for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, right, to build more robust information and reports, dig in deeper and analyze our data a little bit further. We also got some things that are focused around people. So if there's any HR folks on the call, workforce insights for doing workforce planning, looking for people with certain skills, we may be tying into that. So again, lots of new little things that we're building here. I mentioned the third-party agents, right? There's a smattering. This is not an exhaustive list. There are many, many more that are available. Now, your organizations may choose to say, hey, we're not going to allow all of these. They may pick and choose which ones are allowed. But again, there's a large catalog that you can leverage and use. All right. So we've kind of gone through what I would consider our foundation areas. We're going to go in to start building an agent next. And if you've got access to this, please feel free to certainly follow along. Let me go here. So Copilot Studio Lite. let's set some foundation. This has also been known as Agent Builder. So something to be aware of, right? Copilot Studio Lite, Agent Builder, they've had interchangeable names. We may still see that for a while. I see the note about are these third-party free to use. As long as you've got the subscription with that customer, it's going to be, or that third party, it will depend upon your subscription with them. But in our platform, those are free to use. Okay. So Copilot Studio Lite, it's really a no-code kind of development environment. You don't need to do any code to build these agents. And that's what you'll see today as we go through this. It's really just about providing your instructions, right? It's an intuitive experience. You can use some of our starter templates to build, or you can just describe the type of agent you want, and it will start that structure for you. And then these agents, right, again, depending upon organization policy, but by default, you have the ability where you'll just see it yourself when you create it. You can share it with a select group of colleagues, or you can make it something that is available for the entire organization to leverage. So again, some flexibility there with how we build these agents. At our Ignite conference, we announced some new features. One, we enhanced the whole development build. So as I'm telling it what I want to build, we've improved that experience. We're also working to say, okay, how can I do some additional integration, right? So when I'm looking at work-related knowledge sources, right, how can I simply describe information to get some of that context back in the way I want it? We've also added office skills. So the ability for our agents to now create documents based on the prompts from our users, right? We've expanded on what knowledge sources are available. So now I can access my specific Teams meetings or my email or chats right directly from these agents as well. So if you're building that agent for personal productivity, you may want to do that, right? And then the last, kind of making sure we're continuing to have this secured across the organization in a compliant way for our organization's policies. Okay, you're going to see some of this today when we do the instructions. But what's important when we build these agents, right, the types of instructions we provide it, we want to make sure it's clear and actionable language, right? So what should it do, not what should it avoid, right? So don't tell it to do things like provide information in the life or death scenario, right? Like you don't really want to do that. You just want to say what types of things do you want it to provide? Using precise, specific verbs on that, right? Define any non-standard terms, right? Maybe you include a glossary in your instructions so that the tool knows what it's talking about. When people ask about it, they can quickly get a description of how you look at that term, right? Build step-by-step workflows, right? How do you want it to iterate and retrieve that content? What do you want it to think through as it goes through that? Use Markdown in your instructions, right? So headings, subheadings, those types of things, again, helps the agent to align to how it should perform those tasks. And then if you are pulling in other knowledge sources, right? SharePoint or through a third-party connector, right? You will be able to explicitly reference those as well through your instructions. The last link you see on this page, again, you'll get this content if you go to the portal afterwards where we host all of this. There's a link here to how to write effective instructions. It's got a lot more context than what I have just here, but we're just kind of summarizing the things to think through. All right, now let's go back to demo. So as I mentioned, right, we're in this environment. Before we go into the build, I want to just talk about the researcher and analyst real quick. So think of researcher as your analyst, as your deep researcher, PhD in a certain subject area, right? In my use case here, I actually have a tariff brief, and I'll pull that up here so you can see the output. When you ask a researcher to do something, right, it goes out. It uses chain of thought processing. It reasons over a lot of the data, and you can see that type of reasoning it's doing to help make sure that it's verifiable information. A new use that we've rolled out is something called computer use. If you have to access maybe a site with white papers that are behind a paywall, right? You can do that using computer use, something that, again, policies in your organization may determine what you have, but gives you some flexibility there. You can also choose what sources in particular you want research to dig into, right? If you have a specific SharePoint site, you can drop in the URL to look at that location. What I've done, and these can take 15 minutes to run, right? Because again, they're doing a lot of reasoning. So what I've previously done was I asked it to generate a tariff brief for a certain type of chemical. These are chemicals used in agriculture, right? And I've said, look, from China to US, what does this particularly look like, right? Researcher asks you some clarifying questions. So I can go ahead and verify how I want it to proceed. Here, I just told it to go ahead using its best judgment, and I got this massive amount of content back. Here's where it's showing you how it's reasoning and thinking through it, and then here's the output, right? So again, lots of good detail here. And what's nice is because I had this, it's a certain subject area, what I ran today was I asked it to go out and tell me the recent updates, right? So over the past 2 days, has there been any changes to this, right? And so it's now providing me some of that output here. As always, you can look at the sources, see where it's pulling from to get some of this content, just to help you in verification that it's all accurate. Moving into analyst, think about analyst as your data scientist on hand, right? So you've got large, complex Excel files, for example, where you're looking at really detailed data outputs, maybe from Power BI. You can use analyst to dig into that content and provide you results. So again, I've got another item here that kind of went into a review account notes for unmet needs, grouped by types, right? So it came in and started analyzing this data from this Excel. I could then have it create visuals for me, do a bunch of additional tasks. Oops, sorry, I clicked my back button. I can do things like comparing forecast to actual demand, right? Again, depending upon the output that I have. See, it breaks out tables. It can build charts as well. So again, it's doing all that just by looking at that data. So if you've got multiple workbooks, large workbooks, you need to reason over multiple worksheets, tie things together. Analyst is kind of that go-to for doing that deeper analysis.
And then, Cory, do you see in chat, we got a question. If analyst is not available as an option for this person, is it a licensing issue?
Yeah, great question. So this depends on your organization, what they've allowed and not allowed. The analyst agent does ship with the M365 Copilot license. So if you're only a Copilot chat user, you will not have access to the analyst or the researcher agent. You need the full Microsoft 365 Copilot license. Yeah, then if you have the full, then I would check with IT and see if they're doing anything, if they've blocked it for the organization. All right. So again, those were just our biggest two agents that we see a lot of use cases for that solve us from keeping to have to build an agent. But let's go ahead now and move into building the agent. So on the side underneath agents, you do see a new agent option. So if you click on that, that will bring us into basically our agent builder. So for context, while we're here, before I go into building this agent, you will see a My Agents. So let's say you've built other agents before and you're always wondering, how do I get back to them? When you click Create a New Agent, you can then click on this My Agents and it will show kind of all the agents that you've worked on. Even if you've done draft and never published them, you'll be able to see them here as well. So just something to kind of be aware of. So I'm going to go back, click on my Create New Agent. If you just want to start and say, hey, I'm going to describe an agent to you. Maybe I start with one of these templates that I have. I can punch in the type of agent I want, and it will work through that scenario to help you build out that agent. Okay. But since I already have a focused area, I've already got instructions written up for this, we're going to go right into configure. Again, I could start from a template from this drop down. You have a number of them there that you can use. But I'm just going to go straight into details, right? So I can change my icon if I want to. I'm going to name this one my tariff analyst, right? Now I've got some pre-written up stuff. Again, we'll provide this in the follow-up or on the portal where we host this. But I'm going to include just a brief description. This is a required field, right? So just provide a brief description for this. So when people are searching for an agent, they come across yours, they know what the purpose of the agent is. Next up, we have the instructions, right? So when I look at my instructions, right, we are limited to how much we can put in here. I think it's something like 8,000 characters or something like that. But this is what I was talking about on that one slide, right? Writing important instructions. So again, I'm going to copy and paste some of my content in. And I just want to point out some key things. So one, you want that objective or that goal, right? What is the objective of this agent? We're going to monitor public tariff data sources, summarize policy changes, provide actionable insights on how these could change our products, right? So then we put it into the workflow steps. First, validate the HS code. Make sure it's a valid code that we're looking at. Use the search engine, right? If it's unavailable, take it to the customs organization, determine the trade direction, right? Where is it going from, coming to? So import versus export. What's that look like? Identify if it country is a trade partner, right? Query the tariff data. So authenticate if you need to. Retrieve tariff. Actually, we can't do that with this one. I'm going to take that out. Retrieve the tariff rates, duty types, stage rates, all that good stuff. And then how do we want the output? And you can kind of see with all of these, right? I've got different headers. So one's the objective. Then I go into my subheaders. I've got those 2 pound signs. These dashes means it's a bulleted list, right? Error handling. How do we want it to look at that? We might flag something for manual review, right? If we're missing a classification, if it's missing a rate, what do we want to do here? We have our glossary, right? What do these terms mean, right? These acronyms definitely helps us understand that, right? And then security and compliance, right? We want it to only declare classifications that are verified through the approved sources. We don't want it going off tandem, thinking something's accurate and reporting on that. So that's kind of our base instructions. You see there's 8,000 characters, right? Where we can do many, many more instructions here. You may want to provide examples of outputs or what to do when there's an error, right? So you can certainly provide examples in here as well. Next up is our knowledge space, right? So as I mentioned earlier, we're building this based on web data, right? So this is, again, something that anybody in the organization could potentially use. So when we look here at knowledge, you can see some items called out: SharePoint, Teams, email, and then this is your public web, like the globe is your public websites. When we're building these agents, this can be a determination for you. If you need more than 4 public websites, you will need to go into Copilot Studio, okay? So again, think about this. It's personal productivity. It's a focused agent on a specific task. We're using limited data sources. Now I could add many SharePoint sites. I can say, look at all my email. Those could be additional items I add. But for public websites, we can add 4. So for this one, I've got a few sites here. I'm just going to copy and paste them in for now. Let me go do this. I'm doing one at a time. So it's kind of a good thing we're limited to 4. But I'm going to paste in my URL, and I'm just going to click on the suggested just as a way for me to make sure I've verified it for myself, right? We've got trade.gov. Got the World Bank. And then we've got the World Trade Organization. All right, so those are the 4 sites we're looking at. If I did want to add things like my email, right, I can come down and say SharePoint sites or folders, team chats and meetings, my emails. Again, that would be if you're creating something more from the personal productivity side and you have the full license. Now, couple of key things to note. And these are fairly new. These have changed up a little bit. Search all websites, right? Well, I don't want it to do all that because I want to be focused on these main sources, right? So we're actually going to hit the flag to only use the specified sources here, right? That helps us improve our overall accuracy, how we want to leverage this tool set. You do see reference people in the organization. Not something I need to use for this particular agent, but if I want to try to pull in people's skills or who might be a good resource to access for a certain thing, right? I might suggest turn this on. And then the other thing I want to note, we're not going to use it here, but you see other data sources. So your organization may choose to make other data sources available to you in these agents. You can see a couple of examples here. We've got ServiceNow we can connect to, pull in knowledge base articles. I've actually got this enterprise website which looks at Microsoft.com. So if I want to do product research on Microsoft or whatnot, like I can do that through this agent, right? So I could pull those in if I wanted to do so. You see our websites that we've added. And just to kind of point this out, right, I can always click on these and go and open that if I want to review what's going on in that site. As I continue
Cory,
down. Yeah.
Before you move on from like referencing where to get the information from, we do have a question in the chat that might be good for others to hear your thoughts on it. So what would you suggest to do maybe it's additional instructions to the prompt when using multiple sites. So where there might be hallucinations or just random answers due to conflicting information or different updates in different sites.
Yeah. So obviously this is going to vary potentially greatly depending upon the sites you're accessing for this use case. Like I said here, like the best practice is I've got these specified sources. These are basically verified sources that I'm using. We really shouldn't see, in this particular example, conflicting information from those sites. But this is where you may put that in your instructions, right? Maybe it's under error handling. How do we want it to verify which ones it goes into first? Like, this is my priority site. Look for this for the initial information. This should always be the, verified source. Others are supportive of that site potentially, but use this site as my verified source, right? You might add some of that to the instructions. You might add some examples, right, into how you want that response, where you want it to be coming from. So think about that as you're building this out. I think we've got some more detail on the actual article I referenced, which I can actually paste in the chat as well. So I'll do that. And then, Paul, if you've got additional things to add, please feel free to put them in the chat or come off mute.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Cory, I mean, you kind of, I think, alluded to this in your instructions. You could say, well, and I think you have in your instructions to some degree, for this particular, metric, or for these numbers, or these, piece of information, go to this site. For these pieces of information, go to this other site, right? So you could say to it, hey, if it's talking about, I don't know, something specific to a given region, we want you to pull it from this site, and that's the priority, right? So it's really up to you in that respect to tell it what the priority is based on what you're looking for. Yeah.
And think about it through your workflow steps, right? Yeah. So first check this site. If there's nothing there, go to this site. Like, think about it through that kind of a process as well. Great question. Okay, so let's move on down. We're now coming into the capabilities section. So this is what I mentioned was new when I was on the slides, right? The ability to create documents directly from this content, right? So I'm going to flag this as on. I'm not going to create any images with this particular agent, right? So we'll leave that off for now, but do know that you can come in and also have these agents create new content for you, right? If you're in marketing or you're doing employee communications, that might be a use case for an agent as it's creating you maybe draft content for messaging. And then the last piece of this, and we'll see all this in action, right? The last piece of this is suggested prompts, right? So I've got a few here. I'm just going to grab some again and copy and paste. So in the instructions documents that I have that we'll leave as a follow-up, we kind of break this out into sections. So your instructions, what are some potential starter prompts, the data sources being used, right? So again, giving you some ideas. And what you see here, right, as I'm adding content in to this, our item on the right-hand side is updating and adjusting, right? So again, it's kind of building this agent out as we're going through, which means we can always kind of test it as we're building it out, right? So again, some really good kind of ways to interact with this. You can have as many as 6 starter prompts, right? So just kind of think about, what those look like, how you want them to show here, what might be the biggest use cases, right, for people using your agent, if it's something you're going to share more broadly, or if you're just building it for your personal use, right, what are your most common tasks that this agent is going to be used for? Because this basically acts as a launching ground for you, right? So yeah, we've got a few in here. Now I'm not going to publish it just yet. I want to just kind of go in and do some basic testing, right, just to make sure it's starting to pull back the right information. So I also have some little HS codes here, right, that I'm going to pull in. In our glossary, if you saw it, HS code, harmonized system code. So basically how this particular product is referenced globally, right? Punch it in, start thinking, provides a response, calls out what is that code actually for, right? provides more detail. Again, it's doing that output as I've kind of instructed, right, in the instructions here, right? So you can kind of see it's working down through these. So again, I've got some good details here on that particular item. Now, I'm also curious, like, can I do some more things here, right? So maybe I wanted to do a quick cost impact. And this is kind of using that train of thought. Hey, it gave me this output. What might my next question be for this, right? And you can see it's starting to pump out this information and provide me some. And I probably should have been a little more clear, like $1,000 laptop versus just 1,000 laptops. So now it's looking at 1,000 units of laptops. What might it be? But because there's no duty there, right? It's got this 0%. Maybe if it was a part of Section 301, I might see what that is going to be here as well, right? So again, providing you some of that information. Now, because I also said, hey, I want the ability to create presentations, you can also test that while I'm here as well. And so, again, we're just kind of trying to see what the output is. Is this what we're expecting? Is this the type of things that we want it to be able to do? What does that look like? So again, it's kind of going through, here's the types of things we might build. I'll see if this works because this is fairly new. It worked for me earlier. I'll show you the output if it doesn't do it now. But yeah, so again, we announced it 2 weeks ago. The update happened over the last 2 weeks.
That's an exciting update. I'm going to try it out personally because there are so many times where I ask Copilot to create a PowerPoint or a Word or an Excel for me. So it's exciting to see this come to fruition.
Yeah, it's great. And something to know, the general Copilot capability has always been able to create these types, well, I shouldn't say always, is also able to create these types of documents. So again, something to know there. It looks like, okay, it's generated this. Should light as a link for me. Right, so here's a link to my document. We're going to click on that to open it. And here we kind of have the outputs.
That's pretty.
And just as an example, right, it's not always the same. Now, as an organization, the organization may have uploaded a template somewhere into what we call an organizational asset library, so it may reference that. This was the one I created earlier, right? This was based on the cost or tariff impacts overall. So again, right, it has that ability to come in and create that content for you. You may have seen it saved it off to my OneDrive, right? So again, it's going into my organization. It's going into the place that has my security policies. So again, great little kind of capability here. But we did all that through testing, right? Again, we haven't even deployed this to the organization as a whole. So we're going to kind of wrap up doing that aspect here. So now that we've got it, it's kind of working the way we want it. I'm going to hit create. It's going to go and actually finalize the build of that agent for me. While we're on here, what you see is that by default, it's currently private and only available to you. So again, that personal productivity usage is there. You do have a share button. Share is controlled by organizational policy. So depending upon what your organization allows, you may be able to share it to specific users, put in their information here, we'll share with them. You can copy the link and share with them, or anyone in your organization. Again, copy the link and share it out. This doesn't make it show up automatically in the store for anybody to find and access. Right now, they would need the link in order to install it. So again, you have that flexibility here to implement here and share that out. All right, so that was kind of our quick update on how this works. I'm going to actually go and click on this again. We're just going to go to it. So if I now go into all of my agents, oops, let me just go back to create agent. I should have actually added it when it popped up there. So I'm going to go back to my agents here and just click on it. There we go. One last thing before we leave, I talked about uploading the content, right? The other thing I would say, let's see, we've got our analyze products, right? Maybe I have a spreadsheet. I have this one for some codes. I can enter that in, right? So now we're also uploading content to interact with it and get that level of insight. Again, this agent could be used by anybody in the organization. They can manually upload the content or select it from their OneDrive, and it can look at that content and iterate over it as well. So that's it for the overview there. I think as we're wrapping this session up, pull back the presentation here. So, you know, you've seen how to build the agents. If you're thinking about how do we work with agents, I mean, how soon do you think, with the knowledge you have today, you might move from pilot to a production scenario? So, Sarah, if you can launch that that item, that would be great.
It is loading, so just give me a moment.
Sure, thank you. I'll look at the questions here. There's always been a misunderstanding of license requirements for those creating these agents and those who can use it. So this is a little bit tricky. So right now, if your organization has not set up what we call as pay-as-you-go licensing, right? If a user that does not have a Copilot license goes to create an agent, it will only let them use web sources. Okay, so it's intelligent enough to know that. They can create that, they can share that, but it's only hitting that web content, which means there's no additional cost to it. If pay-as-you-go sets up, that gives them more flexibility on the types of agents they can create. So something to be aware of there. I would recommend reaching out to your Microsoft team, if you got one, to talk more detail about that. The other thing is, if I'm creating an agent and I have the Copilot license, then I have the ability to create agents that are looking at work data, all this other data, and it's no additional charge for me to use that agent. So the full Copilot license, you can build light agents and use them unlimited. You can go into Copilot Studio and build agents there. Keep all this in mind, that this is dependent upon your organization policies on what they do and do not allow.
Okay, the poll is not loading, so let's go ahead and just move on.
Yep. So we've had questions and what throughout. Any other questions as we're looking to wrap today? And feel free to come off mute.
So Cory, when would you say that someone would want to use the Copilot Studio Lite versus Copilot Studio Full?
Great question. So we do have some guidance around this as well. And a lot of it is it my personal use? Am I the only one that's going to use this? Is this something that will expand, maybe be useful for the entire organization? We kind of have a decision tree. I'll paste this into the chat as well for how to think through what tool to use when, right? So you can kind of see here, I'll just blow it up a little bit. Is your agent external to the organization, right? So it's not published to Teams, SharePoint, or M365 Copilot. Then, yeah, you're going to want to go to Copilot Studio. Is the scope of the agent broad, right? So does it span department, your organization? Then maybe that's the full experience, because you might want other tasks, additional knowledge sources. Are there complex workflows? Does it need to take action on your behalf? Write that back to another system. Then again, full experience. Does it require granular management, billing, all that? Does it need to go through an application life cycle? Then full experience. But really, personal productivity, limited amount of data sources, retrieval purposes for the main part, right, where I'm just asking for information back and outputs, the light experience is definitely a way to go. Rapid builds, right? You saw how fast we built a meaningful agent here. And then you can iterate on that as time goes on, right? We are making it capable. There will be an option to say, hey, I've built my agent. I've kind of hit a point where now we want to add actions to it. We're actually building in the capability to elevate that agent to make it available in Copilot Studio, so you can then start adding more capabilities to it. So lots of growth happening in the space. You'll continue to see investment in this area. And really just, kind of the sky's the limit, right? Start small, start with Copilot Studio Lite, and then evolve as your needs evolve.